The world of Vigilus burned beneath an ashen sky. The War of Nightmares had officially ended months ago, but the Sentinel world remained a bleeding wound in the Imperium's defenses. Heretic cults, Genestealer insurgents, and chaos-corrupted forces still festered in the ruins of outlying hives. Where darkness lingered, the Inquisition followed. Inquisitor Greyfax stood atop the command chimera in the wastes beyond Hive Dirkton, her augmetic eyes cycling through thermal and aetheric spectrums as she surveyed the devastation. Around her, inquisitorial stormtroopers maintained defensive positions, while tech priests calibrated Auspex scanners. The Ultramarines tactical squad dispatched to support her purge operation stood in perfect formation. 5 warriors in cobalt ceramite, their bolters mag-locked and silent. The squad's brother sergeant's vox crackled. Inquisitor, Auspex is detecting a massive warp anomaly, grid reference Kappa 79er. Greyfax's lips thinned. Classification? Unknown. Not demonic. Not anything in the database. The sky tore open. Not with the cancerous bloom of a warp rift, but with a sound like reality itself gasping. A thunderous crack that rattled armor plating and shattered rockcrete. A column of golden white energy erupted from nothing, burning through the clouds before slamming into the ruins 2 kilometers distant. The shockwave followed seconds later, rolling across the battlefield like the breath of an angry god. All units, converge on the impact site, Greyfax commanded, her voice cutting through the chaos. Weapons hot, extreme caution. Whatever just arrived, it is not Imperial. The crater was 30 meters wide, its edges still glowing with residual energy. At its center stood a man. He was massive, not by Astarte standards, but by human ones. Nearly 7 feet tall, impossibly broad across the shoulders, with wild blonde hair that defied the ash-laden wind. His costume was absurd, red, white and blue, garish colors that screamed frivolity in a galaxy where such things were luxury or madness. But his eyes. The brother sergeant had seen many things in his century of service. He had stared into the compound eyes of Tyranid warriors and the cold malice of chaos sorcerers. But the eyes of the stranger were different. They were blue, searingly, impossibly blue, and burned with an intensity that made even his transhuman physiology hesitate. The man looked around, taking in the devastation with visible confusion. When he spoke, his voice was deep, resonant, and carried across the ruins without augmentation. "Where am I?" Greyfax raised her bolt pistol. "In the name of the God Emperor of mankind, identify yourself. You stand on consecrated Imperial soil, and you will submit to his authority." The man's head snapped toward her. His expression shifted, from confusion to something like recognition, though not of her specifically, of the situation. His posture straightened, and suddenly he seemed even larger. "I mean no harm," he called back, raising both hands in a gesture of peace. "I don't know how I got here, but I'm not your enemy." "That is not for you to decide," Greyfax replied coldly. "Stormtroopers, advance. Astartes covering positions. If he moves, open fire." The stranger's eyes widened slightly. "Please, there's no need for..." The brother sergeant spoke over the vox. "Target is not wearing armor. No visible weapons. Biometric readings are thrown. He's barely augmented. How is he still standing after that impact?" "Unknown," Greyfax said, "which makes him all the more dangerous." The stormtroopers moved forward in practice formations, hellguns raised. The stranger remained still, his hands high, but there was something in his stance, a coiled readiness that reminded the brother sergeant of veteran warriors who knew exactly how dangerous they were. "I'm going to ask you again," Greyfax said, stepping forward. "Who are you? Where did you come from? What is your purpose here?" The man lowered his hands slowly. "My name is All Might. I'm a hero, and I came from somewhere else, somewhere very different from here." "A hero?" Greyfax's voice dripped with scorn. "There are no heroes in the Emperor's Imperium, only his servants and his enemies." All Might's jaw tightened. "Then I hope to prove myself his servant. You will prove nothing until you have been judged." Greyfax raised her hand, and the stormtroopers closed in. Restraint manacles were produced, heavy, Arculotech devices designed to hold even minor psychers. All Might looked at the approaching soldiers, then back to Greyfax. His voice dropped, losing its booming quality but gaining something harder. "I won't resist, but I won't be chained either. You have no choice. I always have a choice." The first stormtrooper reached for his wrist. All Might moved. It wasn't violent. It wasn't aggressive. But in the space between one heartbeat and the next, he simply stepped. And suddenly, he was 10 meters away, still with his hands partially raised, his expression regretful. "I'm sorry," he said, "but I've learned that sometimes peaceful intent has to be backed by strength." The brother sergeant's training kicked in instantly. "Target has preternatural speed. Engage." Bolter fire erupted across the ruins. All Might moved like lightning given form. He dodged, weaved, and when he couldn't avoid the mass reactive rounds entirely, he deflected them with precise strikes of his hands, sending them ricocheting into rubble. The air around him seemed to compress and release with each movement, creating visible shockwaves. "Detroit smash!" His fist struck the ground between himself and the advancing stormtroopers. The resulting shockwave was catastrophic, a hemisphere of compressed air that radiated outward, hurling soldiers backward and cracking ceramite armor without puncturing flesh. They landed hard but alive, groaning and stunned. The brother sergeant processed the attack in tactical terms. Non-lethal, precisely controlled, restrained. This was not an enemy trying to kill them. This was a warrior holding back. Astartes, engage, non-lethal containment. The 5 Ultramarines charged as one, moving with the coordinated perfection of transhuman warriors. They spread out, seeking to overwhelm through numbers and positioning. All Might met them head-on. "Texas, smash!" His leg swept out in a devastating roundhouse kick that caught one Astartes in the chest plate, sending the warrior hurtling backward into a ruined wall. The ceramite cracked but held. The Ultramarine would live. The brother sergeant came in from the side, power fist crackling. All Might caught the blow on his forearm and held it. The ground beneath his feet cracked and cratered from the force, but he didn't buckle. "You're strong," All Might said through gritted teeth. "But strength isn't everything. Carolina smash." He twisted, redirecting the brother sergeant's momentum and adding his own devastating strength. The Ultramarine went flying, crashing through 2 walls before finally stopping. The remaining 3 Astartes pressed the attack. Bolter fire at point-blank range, power weapons seeking his flesh, but All Might move through the assault like a storm given purpose. Each strike precise, each dodge calculated. Oklahoma smash. An uppercut caught one Astartes under the chin, sending the warrior airborne. He landed 15 meters away, his helmet cracked, but his neck intact. Nebraska smash. A double-fisted overhead strike hammered into another Ultramarine's shoulder guards, driving him into the ground hard enough to create another crater. The Astartes groaned but remained conscious. Within 90 seconds, all 5 Ultramarines were down, alive, breathing, but completely incapacitated. All Might stood in the center of the devastation, breathing hard but not exhausted. His costume was torn in places, revealing undamaged skin beneath. He looked at Greyfax, who had her bolt pistol trained on his head. "I don't want to fight you," he said quietly. "Any of you. I just want to understand where I am and how to get home." Greyfax's expression was ice. "You have assaulted the Emperor's angels. You have resisted his Inquisition. There is only one fate for heretics." "Then I guess we're at an impasse." For a long moment, neither moved. Around them, stormtroopers groaned and tried to rise. The Astartes were already beginning to recover, their enhanced biology knitting minor injuries. Finally, Greyfax lowered her weapon slightly. "You will come with us. You will answer our questions. And you will submit to psychic scrutiny. If you refuse, I will declare you excommunicate traitoris and order your destruction. Consequences be damned." All Might considered this. Then, slowly, he nodded. "I'll answer your questions, but I won't be imprisoned, and I won't be tortured. You're in no position to make demands, and you're in no position to contain me." His voice was gentle, but the truth of it hung in the air like a blade. "So let's find a better way." The interrogation took place in the half-ruined administratum building that served as the inquisitorial command post. All Might sat in the center of a cleared room, surrounded by stormtroopers with hellguns trained on him from every angle. The Ultramarines had taken up positions outside, their injuries already mostly healed, their humiliation still fresh. Greyfax stood before him, flanked by a Lex Mechanic and a sanctioned Psyker, a hollow-eyed woman whose presence made the air taste of copper. "Begin," Greyfax commanded. The Psyker stepped forward, her eyes beginning to glow with witchfire. All Might felt something press against his mind, a probing, invasive sensation that made him instinctively recoil. "Throne," the Psyker whispered. "He has no psychic resistance at all. His soul is bright, impossibly bright, but unshielded." Greyfax's eyes narrowed. "Explain." "He is not of the warp, not touched by demons, but his presence is intense, like staring into a star, and he has no defenses. A determined Psyker could shred his mind in seconds." All Might forced himself to remain still, though every instinct screamed to pull away from the psychic scrutiny. "Get out of my head," he said quietly. "Answer the Inquisitor's questions and I will," the Psyker replied. Greyfax began. "What are you?" "A human being. You deflected bolt rounds with your bare hands. I'm enhanced through training and something else." "Something else?" Greyfax leaned forward. "Elaborate." All Might hesitated. The secret of One for All was not his alone to share. It belonged to Nana, to Izuku, to every successor who had carried the torch of hope across generations. "I possess an ability," he said carefully. "It was given to me by someone I trusted. It allows me to channel physical power far beyond normal human limits." "Xenos taint? Demonic pact?" "Neither. It's genetic. Passed down through choice, not corruption." The Psyker's eyes widened. He believes what he's saying. There's no deception. Greyfax was unmoved. Belief and truth are not always aligned. Many heretics believe their damnation is salvation. She circled him slowly. "You refuse to kill. Why?" "Because that's not what heroes do." "Hero." The word was poison on her tongue. "You are in the Imperium of Man. We are besieged on all sides by Xenos, heretics, and demons. Every moment of mercy is a betrayal of humanity's survival. Your idealism is a luxury we cannot afford. All Might met her gaze steadily. I've heard that before. From villains who thought the ends justified any means. They were wrong. Were they? Or did they simply understand what you refused to accept? That in a cruel universe, only the cruel survive? If I believed that, All Might said quietly, I would have lost my way a long time ago. Greyfax stared at him for a long moment. Then she turned to the Lex Mechanic. Classification? The tech priest's mechadendrites whirred. Subject displays superhuman physical capabilities approximating low-tier psycho manifestation, but without psychic signature. Origin unknown. Threat level, Crimson Delta. Recommendation, immediate termination or indefinite containment. You can't contain me, All Might said. Not boastfully, simply stating fact. No, Greyfax agreed, we cannot, which presents a unique problem. She stopped directly in front of him. You are a walking anomaly. Your very existence defies Imperial classification. By every law of the Inquisition, you should be destroyed, but you have shown restraint, discipline. You could have killed my stormtroopers. You could have killed the Astartes. You didn't. Her expression remained hard, but something shifted behind her eyes. I am many things, stranger, but I am not foolish enough to destroy a potential asset without cause. All Might blinked. Are you giving me a chance? I am testing you. There is a Tyranid splinter fleet approaching the Vigilus system. Elements of Splinter Fleet Kronos still threaten the outer sectors. The Ultramarines are deploying to reinforce Espandor in the Ultramar realm. If you wish to prove you are not a threat to the Imperium, she smiled coldly, then prove you are useful to it. Fight alongside the Emperor's angels. Protect his people. Show us what your heroism is worth. All Might stood slowly. The stormtroopers tensed, but he made no aggressive moves. If there are people who need saving, then yes, I'll fight. Good. Greyfax turned toward the door. Because if you fail, or if you show even a hint of corruption, I will personally put a bolt round through your skull. Is that clear? All Might's expression was grim. Crystal clear. As he was escorted out, the brother sergeant watched from the shadows. The Ultramarine had fought Orcs, Chaos Marines, and Necron warriors. He knew what killers looked like. This man, this All Might, was no killer, but that didn't mean he wasn't dangerous. The Macragge's honor hung in the void like a cathedral of war, its lance batteries aligned toward the distant Tyranid biosignatures threatening the outer reaches of Ultramar. On the bridge, Chapter Master Manus Calgar reviewed tactical displays with the cold efficiency of a warrior who had defended the 500 worlds for centuries. Splinter Fleet Kronos elements confirmed, the ship's master of Auspex reported. Bioship count, 31 major vessels, countless smaller organisms. Trajectory, Espandor system. Population, Calgar asked. 8 million Imperial citizens in the shrine city of Kalax Hope alone. 12 PDF regiments across the continent. Fortifications rated sufficient for minor incursions only. Calgar's jaw tightened beneath his helm. Evacuation. Underway, but they won't get everyone off-world in time. Then we hold the line. The chapter master turned to his assembled officers. We deploy in full battalion strength. 1st, 2nd, and 5th companies will establish defensive positions around Kalax Hope. Captain Sicarius, your 2nd company will anchor the northern approach. Cato Sicarius, resplendent in his artificer armor, inclined his head. It will be done, chapter master. The Tyranids will break against our wall like waves against the cliffs of Macragge. See that they do. Calgar paused. And there is one additional matter. We will be joined by an anomaly. Designation, All Might. He is under inquisitorial observation. Sicarius's expression soured. The unaugmented who bested an entire tactical squad on Vigilus. I heard the report. A lucky engagement. Luck does not defeat 5 Astartes in 10 seconds, Calgar said quietly. Whatever he is formidable. Inquisitor Greyfax has requested he be given an opportunity to prove his loyalty. We will accommodate her request. And if he proves treacherous, then you will have the honor of correcting our error, Captain. Espandor was a world of contrasts. The shrine city of Kalak's Hope stood as a monument to imperial faith and military precision. Marble towers rising toward azure skies. Training grounds where PDF troopers drilled in perfect formation. Shrines dedicated to Roboute Guilliman and the God Emperor. All Might stood on the northern defensive wall, watching the horizon with the same intensity he'd once used to scan the streets of Tokyo for villains. The landscape beyond the city was beautiful. Rolling hills covered in purple grass. Forests of silver-barked trees, distant mountains capped with snow. But the sky was changing. First came the spores. Billions of microscopic organisms that fell like toxic snow, coating everything in a faint biological film. Then came the shadow. Massive bioships blotting out the stars, their forms more nightmare than the vessel. And then came the swarm. They descended from the mycetic spores like a living tide. Termagants by the thousands, hormagaunts in screeching waves, Tyranid warriors striding through the chaos with horrifying intelligence. The ground shook with the impact of falling organisms, and the air filled with the chittering, shrieking cacophony of the hive mind. All Might felt it then, a pressure against his thoughts, alien and vast, not psychic invasion, but presence, weight. Like standing beneath the ocean and feeling the mass of the water above. His head throbbed. His vision swam. Focus, he told himself. People need you. All warriors to your positions, Captain Sicarius's voice boomed across the Vox network. For Ultramar, for the Emperor. The Ultramarines opened fire with devastating precision. Bolter rounds carved through termagants. Heavy weapons turned hormagaunts into paste. Tactical brilliance met biological horror in a grinding war of attrition. All Might watched a squad of guardsmen, nearly overwhelmed by a flanking wave of hormagaunts. Their lasguns carved through chitin, but there were too many, coming too fast. He didn't think. He just moved. Detroit smash! The shockwave obliterated the first rank of Tyranids, sending carapaces flying and clearing a 20-meter radius. The guardsman stared in shock as All Might landed among them, his smile bright despite the darkness. "Fear not, citizens," he called, "because I am here. What in the throne? Less talking, more shooting." All Might grabbed a dead hormagaunt and hurled it with such force that it became a biological missile, bowling through a dozen more Xenos. "I'll handle the close combat." And he did. Texas smash! His kick bisected a Tyranid warrior, the sheer force of the blow creating a shockwave that staggered nearby organisms. Oklahoma smash! His fist pulverized a Ravener as it burst from the ground, collapsing the tunnel behind it. Carolina smash! An overhead strike shattered a Carnifex's carapace, sending the massive beast reeling backward inbound into its own swarm. Around him, guardsmen began to fight with renewed vigor. His presence, his voice, cut through the psychic pressure of the hive mind like a beacon. Where he fought, soldiers rallied. The brother sergeant from Vigilus, now coordinating defense from a nearby battlement, watched with grudging respect. Target is engaging Tyranid organisms with extreme effectiveness. Non-lethal doctrine apparently does not extend to Xenos. Captain Sicarius appeared beside him, his plasma pistol burning holes through termagants. Impressive, but can he maintain this pace? As if in answer, All Might's movements began to slow. Not dramatically, but noticeably. The synaptic pressure of the hive mind was intensifying as more synapse creatures entered the battle. His head pounded, his lungs burned, but he didn't stop. Nebraska smash! Another Carnifex fell, its skull crushed. A Tyranid warrior lunged at him from behind. He spun, but too slowly. Bolt of fire tore through the creature's head. The brother sergeant landed beside All Might, his weapon still smoking. "You fight well, Anomaly," the Ultramarine said, "but even you need support." All Might grinned through the pain. "Then let's show them what teamwork looks like." For 3 hours, they held the wall. All Might fought alongside Astartes and guardsmen alike, his attacks creating spaces for Imperial fire to be most effective. He saved Sicarius from a lictor's ambush. He pulled wounded guardsmen from the battlefield. He pushed himself harder than he had in years, calling out attack after attack until his voice was hoarse and his body screamed for rest. And slowly, impossibly, the tide turned. The Tyranids began to withdraw, not in defeat, but in tactical repositioning. The hive mind was adapting, learning. But for now, the wall held. All Might stood, breathing hard. His costume was shredded, his body covered in minor lacerations from glancing blows, but he was smiling. Captain Sicarius approached, his armor scorched and scratched. For a long moment, he simply stared at the man. Then, grudgingly, he extended a gauntleted hand. "You fought with honor, All Might. Perhaps there is more to you than Anomaly." All Might clasped the hand. "Thank you, Captain. Your warriors are incredible. I've never fought alongside anyone quite like them. And we have never fought alongside someone quite like you." Sicarius's expression remained stern, but there was a flicker of respect in his eyes. "Rest while you can. The hive mind will return. It always does. In orbit, aboard the Macrage's Honor." Marnus Calgar reviewed battle reports in his private chamber. The engagement had been successful, but the Tyranid fleet was far from defeated. And more concerning were the reports from the field. Accounts of a warrior who fought like one of the Emperor's angels, despite being unaugmented, whose voice rallied Imperial forces against the psychic weight of the hive mind. His vox bead chirped. "Chapter Master, Priority Astropathic Message, Origin Macragge. Sender, Lord Commander Roboute Guilliman." Calgar straightened. Display. The message was brief, characteristic of the Primarch's efficiency. "Reports of the anomaly designated All Might have reached my attention. Continue observation. Bring him to Macragge when Espandor is secured. I would speak with this hero myself. Guilliman." Calgar allowed himself the ghost of a smile. "So the Lord Commander is curious. Very well." He opened a channel to Captain Sicarius. "Captain, inform the anomaly that he will have the opportunity to meet the Primarch. Let us see if his heroism survives scrutiny by a son of the Emperor." Macragge was beautiful. All Might stood on the landing platform of the Fortress of Hera, staring out across the landscape of Ultramar's capital world. Impossibly blue skies, marble architecture that rivaled anything from Earth's classical age, gardens maintained with military precision. It was so different from the battlefields he'd been fighting on, so different from the grim darkness he'd witnessed in this universe. Impressive, is it not? The voice was deep, cultured, and carried the weight of immeasurable authority. all might turn to see him. Roboute Guilliman, Lord Commander of the Imperium, Primarch of the Ultramarines. He was massive even by Astarte standards, easily 10 feet tall in his armor of deepest blue and gold. The armor of fate hummed with barely contained power, and the Emperor's sword hung at his side like a promise of devastation. But it was his face that struck All Might most, ancient, weary, yet somehow still human, still capable of expression beyond mere combat readiness. All Might bowed respectfully. Lord Commander, thank you for agreeing to meet with me. The gratitude is unnecessary. Guilliman descended the steps from the fortress entrance, his movements controlled and deliberate. You are an anomaly that has captured the Inquisition's attention, fought alongside my sons, and apparently refuses to die despite lacking augmentation or psychic shielding. Naturally, I am curious. They walked together through the gardens, Guilliman's stride measured to allow All Might to keep pace. Guardsmen and Astartes watched from discreet distances, ready to intervene if the anomaly proved hostile. May I ask you something, Lord Commander? All Might said after a moment. Speak. What happened to this galaxy? I've seen battlefields across my world, fought villains who threaten millions. But this, he gestured broadly, this is beyond anything I ever imagined. How did it become so dark? Guilliman was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of 10,000 years. Entropy, ambition, the failings of my father's vision, and the incompetence of those who came after. He paused beside a fountain, its waters crystal clear. My father sought to unite humanity under reason and science, to create an imperium where superstition was banished and mankind could reclaim the stars. What went wrong? Everything. Guilliman's expression darkened. My brothers betrayed us, half fell to chaos, to the ruinous powers of the warp. Civil war consumed the Imperium. My father was mortally wounded and bound to the Golden Throne, neither living nor dead. And in the millennia since, the Imperium he built has become a grotesque parody of his original vision, a theocratic nightmare that worships him as a god, the very thing he despised. All might process this, but you're trying to fix it. That's why you came back. I am trying to prevent total annihilation, Guilliman corrected. The Imperium is too vast, too entrenched in its dogma to truly change. I can only shore up the walls and pray they hold long enough for humanity to survive another century. That sounds exhausting. It is. Guilliman turned to face him fully, which brings me to you. You fight without armor. You refuse to kill even when killing would be tactically sound. You speak of heroism in a galaxy that has forgotten what the word means. Inquisitor Greyfax believes you are either dangerously naive or secretly corrupted. And what do you believe? The Primarch studied him with eyes that had seen the birth and death of empires. I believe you are genuine, which makes you either the most dangerous or most valuable thing I have encountered in recent memory. All Might met his gaze steadily. I'm not trying to be dangerous. I just want to help, to save people. It's what I've always done. Why? Guilliman's question was sharp. You owe this galaxy nothing. You did not ask to be here. You could use your power to carve out a domain, to rule through strength, yet you choose to serve without asking for reward or recognition. Why? All Might smiled, a real smile, warm and genuine. Because someone once told me that heroes don't exist to be served, they exist to serve. And if I stop believing that, If I start thinking my power gives me the right to rule instead of the responsibility to protect. He shook his head. Then I'm not a hero anymore. I'm just another tyrant with good publicity. Guilliman said nothing for a long moment. Then, to All Might's surprise, he laughed, a short, bitter sound. You would have liked him. My father, before he became what he is now, he spoke of duty and sacrifice, of the burdens of power. The Primarch's expression hardened. But his idealism led to catastrophe. His refusal to acknowledge the spiritual needs of humanity created a void that chaos filled. Noble intentions paved the road to damnation. Maybe, All Might conceded, but that doesn't mean we stop trying. It means we learn from mistakes and do better. Do better? Guilliman's voice rose slightly. All Might, we are besieged on all sides. The Tyranids devour entire sectors. Chaos corrupts from within. The Necrons awaken and reclaim their ancient domains. The Orcs multiply endlessly. Every day, billions die. Every decision I make condemns millions. And you speak of doing better, as if hope itself hasn't become the greatest lie in the galaxy. All Might stepped closer, his voice calm but firm. I faced that despair before, Lord Commander. When I was told I couldn't save everyone, when I lost my mentor, when I had to accept that my time was limited, and one day someone else would have to carry the torch. He placed a hand over his heart. But despair is a choice, and so is hope. Every person you save, every world you protect, every stand you make against the darkness, that matters. Not because it solves everything, but because it proves something essential, that there are still those willing to fight for something better. And when fighting is not enough, then you inspire others to fight alongside you. You show them that even in the darkest moment, there's still a reason to stand up, because the alternative, giving in to despair, accepting cruelty as necessary, that's not survival. That's just slow death. Guilliman stared at him, and for the first time since his resurrection, the Primarch felt something he'd thought long dead. Recognition. Not of the man before him, but of an ideal he'd once held. A belief that perhaps, against all evidence, there could be something beyond mere survival. You are a fool, Guilliman said quietly, but perhaps this galaxy needs more fools. Before All Might could respond, alarms blared across Macragge. Guilliman's vox bead crackled with urgent reports. Lord Commander, Tyranid bioships have broken through the orbital defense. Kronos elements making planetfall, multiple landing sites across the southern continent. Guilliman's expression shifted instantly from philosophical to tactical. All units, combat deployment, secure evacuation routes for civilian populations, target priority, synapse creatures. He turned to All Might. Can you fight? All Might's smile returned, bright and determined. Just watch me. The final battle was apocalyptic. Tyranids descended on Macragge's southern reaches in numbers that blotted out the sun. Mycetic spores crashed like meteors, disgorging warriors by the thousand. Bio-titans strode across the landscape, their bio-cannons reducing fortifications to rubble. The Ultramarines deployed in full chapter strength. Every company, every veteran, every scout in training. The sky filled with thunderhawks and storm talons. Land raiders carved through the swarm. Predator tanks laid down withering fire. And at the center of the maelstrom, two figures fought side by side. Roboute Guilliman was a demigod of war, the Emperor's sword carving through Tyranid bioforms with contemptuous ease. Where he walked, Ultramarines rallied. Where he pointed, enemies died. His tactical brilliance turned chaos into coordinated slaughter. Beside him, All Might, was a hurricane of heroism. Detroit smash! His fist shattered a Carnifex's skull, the shockwave bowling over termagants in a 30-meter radius. United States of Smash! The technique he'd used to defeat All for One, saved for only the most desperate moments, erupted from his entire body. A column of compressed air rose into the sky, visible for kilometers. The shockwave obliterated everything in its path. Tyranids, rubble, even the ground itself. A bio-titan staggered and fell, its carapace fractured beyond repair. All Might stood for a moment, gasping. The synaptic pressure was crushing. A zoanthrope emerged from the swarm, its scything talons dripping with venom. It moved toward All Might with terrifying intelligence, recognizing a wounded threat. Zoanthropes were Tyranids, yes, but also powerful psychers. All Might had been carrying the battle, fighting for longer than he ever had before, expending insane amounts of energy even for himself with these big attacks. And the Tyranids, they seemed to be infinite. The brother sergeant from Vigilus and Captain Sicarius appeared on either side of him, their weapons raised. "You saved us on Espandor," the brother sergeant said. "Now we return the favor." "You are not dying here, Anomaly," Sicarius added, "not after fighting so well." The three of them, 2 Astartes and 1 hero, stood together as the zoanthrope charged. All Might forced himself upright, drawing on reserves he didn't know he had. "One more," he whispered. "Just one more. Texas, smash!" His kick, combined with concentrated bolter fire and Sicarius's plasma pistol, caught the zoanthrope mid-leap. The creature's carapace shattered, and it crashed to the ground, twitching. The civilians, are they safe? "Evacuation complete," Sicarius confirmed. Kneeling beside him, "You did it, All Might. You held the line." All Might's smile was but genuine. "Good. That's what matters." Guilliman approached, the Emperor's sword still burning with holy fire. He looked at the hero, and something shifted in his ancient features. "You fought like one of my sons," the Primarch said quietly. "Better than some. You have my respect, All Might, and my gratitude." 3 days later, All Might stood in the hall of Ultramarines, his body mostly healed through rest and basic Imperial medical care. His costume had been repaired, poorly but functionally. Around him stood the leadership of the Ultramarines, Inquisitor Greyfax and Roboute Guilliman. "The question remains," Greyfax said, her voice formal. "What to do with you? By every law of the Imperium, you should be executed or imprisoned," Guilliman said. "You are an unclassified anomaly. Your origin is unknown. Your power defies explanation." All Might nodded slowly. "I understand. However," Guilliman's expression softened slightly, "you have proven yourself in battle. You have saved Imperial lives. And you have demonstrated that not all anomalies are threats." He paused. "I cannot officially sanction your presence. The Inquisition would never accept it. But I can offer you conditional tolerance." "Meaning?" "Meaning you will be classified as Crimson Level, contained through cooperation. You will be monitored, your activities restricted, but you will not be hunted." Greyfax's expression was sour. "Lord Commander, I must protest. Your protest is noted, Inquisitor. But I am Lord Commander of the Imperium, and this is my judgment." Guilliman turned back to All Might. "You will never be one of us. You will never be trusted completely. But you will be tolerated. Is that acceptable?" All Might thought of home, of Izuku, who would be waiting for him, of the world he'd sworn to protect, But he thought also of the people here, the guardsmen who had rallied at his voice, the Astartes who had fought beside him, the civilians who had lived because he had held the line. "If I can help," he said quietly, "then yes, that's acceptable." Guilliman nodded once. "Then go, all might. Find your way home if you can, but know that if you remain in this galaxy, you will be watched, and if you prove false, the threat hung unspoken." All Might smiled. "I understand, Lord Commander, and thank you for giving me a chance." As he was escorted from the hall, the brother sergeant from Vigilus fell into step beside him. "What will you do now?" the Astartes asked. All Might looked up at the stars visible through the fortress windows. Somewhere out there was his home, his world, his student. But here, now, there were still people who needed help. "I'm going to do what I always do," he said. "I'm going to be a hero, for as long as I can, until I find my way home, or until I can't stand anymore." The brother sergeant nodded slowly. "Then you will not stand alone. That much at least, I can promise." In the throne room of the fortress of Hera, Roboute Guilliman stood alone, staring at a hololithic display of the galaxy. So much darkness, so many threats, so little hope. He dismissed the display with a gesture and turned toward the chamber's altar, a modest shrine compared to the grotesque temples the ecclesiarchy had erected across the Imperium. Here, in privacy, he could acknowledge what he refused to speak aloud, that his father still existed, trapped in eternal torment upon the golden throne. Guilliman knelt, not in worship, but in something closer to weary communion. And then, as it had only a handful of time since his resurrection, he felt pressure, not the crushing weight of the warp, not the insidious whispers of chaos, but something else, ancient, vast, and undeniably familiar. The psychic presence of the Emperor of Mankind pressed against the veil of reality, reaching across the light years from Terra to Macragge. "My son." The voice was not sound. It was thought made manifest, carrying with it the weight of 10,000 years of agony and unimaginable psychic strain. Yet beneath the pain, Guilliman heard something he'd feared lost: recognition, awareness, consciousness. "Father," Guilliman said aloud, his voice steady despite the enormity of the moment. "You reach out. Why now?" The anomaly, the one they call All Might. Guilliman's eyes narrowed slightly. "You've observed him, even from Terra." His soul burns bright enough to be seen across the galaxy, not with the taint of chaos, nor the cold hunger of the Necrons, nor the ravenous emptiness of the Tyranids. He is different, a light from another reality entirely. "He is an anomaly," Guilliman agreed. "Powerful but undisciplined, idealistic to the point of foolishness. He refuses to kill even when tactical necessity demands it. He speaks of heroism as if it were currency in a galaxy that trades only in blood. And yet you spared him." It was not a question, but Guilliman answered anyway. "Because he proved himself in battle. Because he saved Imperial lives. Because..." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Because destroying him would have been wasteful. He is a weapon, Father. One that must be carefully managed, but a weapon nonetheless." "Is that truly what you believe?" The question hung in the psychic space between them, laden with implications. Guilliman stood slowly, his expression hardening. "What would you have me believe? That he is some gift from the warp? A sign of hope in the darkness? I have seen where such thinking leads. I have watched this Imperium worship you as a god and pervert everything you built. I will not add another Messiah to their delusions. I do not ask you to worship him, Roboute. I ask you to recognize what he represents. And what is that? A reminder. Finally, Guilliman asked the question that had haunted him since his resurrection. Why did you bring me back? What purpose do I serve in this nightmare you've created? To do what I could not. To lead without the certainty that destroyed us. To accept that perhaps the answer lies not in grand designs or crusades, but in recognizing that humanity's strength has always been its capacity to choose hope, even when reason demands despair. That sounds like something all might would say. Yes, and Guilliman could feel something like approval radiating from his father. Perhaps that is why he was sent here, not by design, but by necessity. A mirror to show us what we have lost. A reminder that power without purpose is merely destruction with better publicity. Guilliman almost smiled at that. Did you just mock me using his words? I have had 10,000 years to consider my failures, my son. I have earned the right to a little irony. The psychic connection began to fade. The strain of maintaining it across such distance, clearly taxing even the Emperor's immense will. But before it vanished entirely, Guilliman felt one final thought. He will need guidance, Roboute. He will face horrors that will test his ideals. And when that moment comes, when he stands at the precipice and must choose between his principles and survival, do not let him fall alone. That much at least I ask of you. And if his idealism gets him killed, if it gets my sons killed, then you will have learned what I learned too late, that some things are worth dying for, even in the 41st millennium. The presence vanished, leaving Guilliman alone once more in the throne room. He stood in silence for a long time, processing what had transpired. His father, the master of mankind, the anathema, the god emperor, had reached across the galaxy to speak of a stranger in a ridiculous costume who refused to kill and spoke of heroism like it mattered. Outside the fortress, All Might looked up at the stars, unaware that the most powerful psyker in human history had just discussed his fate. Guilliman walked to the window and watched the anomaly, this symbol of peace, standing beneath Macrage's brilliant sky with a determined smile on his face. Perhaps you're right, Father, Guilliman murmured to the empty air. Perhaps this galaxy needs more fools, if only to remind us what we've forgotten. And for the first time since his resurrection, Roboute Guilliman allowed himself to feel something other than duty or despair. He allowed himself to feel curiosity about what might come next. Finally, Guilliman asked the question that had haunted him since his resurrection. Why did you preserve my soul so they could bring me back? What purpose do I serve in this nightmare you've created? To do what I could not, to lead without the certainty that destroyed us, to accept that perhaps the answer lies not in grand designs or crusades, but in recognizing that humanity's strength has always been its capacity to choose hope, even when reason demands despair. That sounds like something All Might would say, yes, and Guilliman could feel something like approval radiating from his father. Perhaps that is why he was sent here, not by design, but by necessity, a mirror to show us what we have lost, a reminder that power without purpose is merely destruction with better publicity. Guilliman almost smiled at that. Did you just mock me using his words? I have had 10,000 years to consider my failures, my son. I have earned the right to a little irony. The psychic connection began to fade, the strain of maintaining it across such distance clearly taxing even the Emperor's immense will. But before it vanished entirely, Guilliman felt one final thought. He will need guidance, Roboute. He will face horrors that will test his ideals. And when that moment comes, when he stands at the precipice and must choose between his principles and survival, do not let him fall alone. That much, at least, I ask of you. And if his idealism gets him killed, if it gets my sons killed, then you will have learned what I learned too late, that some things are worth dying for, even in the 41st millennium. The presence vanished, leaving Guilliman alone once more in the throne room. He stood in silence for a long time, processing what had transpired. His father, the master of mankind, the anathema, the god emperor, had reached across the galaxy to speak of a stranger in a ridiculous costume who refused to kill and spoke of heroism like it mattered. Outside the fortress, all might looked up at the stars, unaware that the most powerful psycho in human history had just discussed his fate. Guilliman walked to the window and watched the anomaly, this symbol of peace, standing beneath Macragge's brilliant sky with a determined smile on his face. "Perhaps you're right, Father," Guilliman murmured to the empty air. "Perhaps this galaxy needs more fools, if only to remind us what we've forgotten." And for the first time since his resurrection, Roboute Guilliman allowed himself to feel something other than duty or despair. He allowed himself to feel curiosity about what might come next. All might stood alone in the gardens of the fortress of Hera, watching the twin moons rise over Macragge's perfect horizon. The air was cool, scented with flowers he couldn't name, and for a moment, just a moment, he could almost pretend he was home. But he wasn't home, and he might never be again. The thought should have terrified him, should have filled him with despair. Instead, he felt something else: purpose. He'd fought alongside warriors who had forgotten what it meant to hope. He'd seen soldiers rally at the sound of his voice, not because he was stronger or faster than the enemy, but because he believed, truly believed, that they could win, that they were worth saving. The Imperium would never accept him. Greyfax would always see him as a potential threat. Even Guilliman, for all his philosophical discussion, viewed him through the lens of tactical utility. He was an anomaly to be managed, not a hero to be celebrated. And yet, he thought of the brother sergeant who had saved him from the Tyranid warrior, of Sicarius, who had extended his hand in respect after the battle, of the guardsman who had fought harder because he stood beside them, of Guilliman himself, who had listened, truly listened, to ideas that must have sounded like madness in this brutal age. Small victories, tiny cracks in a wall of darkness so vast it seemed impenetrable, but cracks nonetheless. All Might clenched his fist, feeling the familiar surge of one for all coursing through him, weaker than it once was, strained by battles in this unforgiving universe, but still there, still burning. "Young Midoriya," he said softly to the stars, knowing his student couldn't hear him, but needing to say the words anyway. "I don't know if I'll ever see you again. I don't know if I'll find a way home. But I want you to know, I'm still fighting, still smiling, still standing." The wind carried his words away into the Macragge night. This galaxy doesn't believe in heroes anymore. They've forgotten what it means to stand for something beyond survival. But maybe that's exactly why I'm here. Not to save them. I'm not arrogant enough to think one man can fix 10,000 years of darkness, but to remind them, to show them that even in the worst circumstances, even when every tactical calculation says to compromise your principles, you can still choose to be better. He thought of Nana Shimura, his own mentor, who had given him one for all, and taught him what it meant to be a symbol of peace, she would have understood this place, would have seen the suffering and the cruelty and the endless war, and still found a reason to smile, because that was what heroes did. They stood in the darkness and became the light that others needed to see. All Might's smile widened, genuine despite everything, despite the pain in his body from pushing one for all beyond its limits, despite the uncertainty of his future, despite knowing he might die in this strange galaxy, far from home and forgotten by those he'd sworn to protect. "I am here," he whispered to the universe that had become his burden and his purpose. "And as long as I draw breath, I will be a hero. Not because this galaxy asked for one, not because the Imperium wants one, but because someone has to remember what heroism means." He turned back toward the fortress of Hera, where the Ultramarines stood eternal vigil, where Guilliman carried the weight of humanity's survival, where even the smallest act of mercy was seen as weakness. All Might walked forward, his step steady, his resolve unshaken. Somewhere in the darkness ahead, people would need saving. And when they did, they would hear his voice calling out attack names that must sound absurd to warriors who knew only grim efficiency. They would see his smile in the midst of horror. They would witness someone who refused to kill even when killing would be easier. And perhaps, just perhaps, some of them would remember that humanity had once dreamed of something better. "Fear not," All Might said to himself, to the galaxy, to whatever fate awaited him in this grim darkness, "for I am here." And in the 41st millennium, where there was only war, one man's refusal to surrender his ideals became an act of rebellion more powerful than any weapon.